Why would a multimillionaire at the peak of his fame choose to spend 5 months a year in the dirt, breathing soot, and jumping out of planes to fight forest fires? The answer reveals a fundamental truth about how the human brain builds willpower. It suggests that the grit we admire isn't a gift we are born with, but a physical structure we must build and maintain every single day. This discussion features Dr. Andrew Huberman, a professor of neurobiology at Stanford, and David Goggins, a retired Navy SEAL and world record endurance athlete. While Goggins is often seen as a symbol of extreme motivation, this conversation goes under the hood of his internal dialogue. They explore the intersection of hard-won experience and the biological mechanisms of the mind. By looking at Goggins' journey from a 300-pound man with learning disabilities to a global icon of discipline, we can find a practical blueprint for reclaiming our own inner strength. 1. Mastery through brutal repetition. Many people assume that high achievers like David Goggins possess a natural gift for focus. He reveals, however, that his starting point was the opposite. Born with significant learning disabilities and ADHD, Goggins describes himself as being at the bottom of the barrel. To learn basic medical information for his paramedic training, he cannot simply read a textbook. He must write out every single page by hand, repeatedly, until he develops a photographic memory of the text. This process highlights a core idea. Learning is an algorithm of nouns and verbs. It is not enough to know the names of things. You must understand how they function together under pressure. Goggins views this pain-in-the-ass study method as a form of suffering that is just as important as his physical training. It teaches us that if we find a subject difficult, the solution is not a clever shortcut or a productivity hack. The solution is the willingness to repeat the process until the brain has no choice but to adapt. Mastery is built in the deep trench of focus where repetition eventually replaces resistance. 2. The biological seat of willpower. Dr. Huberman introduces a critical piece of neuroscience that explains the physical reality of tenacity, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. This specific brain region is not just a concept. It is a physical structure that acts as a hub for the will to live. Research shows that this area grows larger when we do things we explicitly do not want to do. The key is the friction. If you love running and you go for a run, this part of your brain does not change. But if you hate the cold and you force yourself into an ice bath, the structure grows. This is a profound insight into the Goggins-esque mindset. Willpower is not a vague personality trait. It is a perishable resource. If you stop doing the hard things that cause you discomfort, the anterior mid-cingulate cortex actually shrinks. This explains why people who were successful in the past often feel lost in the present. They have stopped investing in the friction that built their will in the first place. To keep your edge, you must consistently seek out the tasks you are tempted to avoid. 3. The internal medicine. Cabinet A major misunderstanding about discipline is that it requires external motivation, like a specific song or an inspirational video. Goggins argues that these are false dopamine hits. They provide a temporary buzz, but leave you empty when the music stops. Instead, he advocates for building an internal medicine cabinet. This cabinet is filled with your own unseen work. The moments you trained alone at 2 in the morning or finished a task when no one was watching. When Goggins faces a moment of total exhaustion, he doesn't look to a mentor or a quote. He reaches into his own history for proof of what he has already survived. This resume of motivation is powerful because it is tangible and true. By training yourself to function without a pat on the back, you develop a form of self-reliance that cannot be taken away. True confidence is the result of looking yourself in the eye and knowing that you have done the work required to be in the room. 4. The two voices of internal dialogue. Goggins describes the mind not as a single stream of thought, but as a dialogue between two distinct voices. The first voice is the one we are all born with, the one that seeks comfort, tells us we are nobody, and encourages us to quit when things get ugly. The second voice is the one we must create through years of sacrifice. This is the voice of the practitioner who can ignore the primal urge to settle for average. Most people only have the first voice, which leads to inaction. Goggins explains that he doesn't override the voice of doubt. He engages in a war with it. He acknowledges his failures and insecurities openly, because that honesty is the only way to build the second voice. This internal conflict is what creates the supercomputer of the unconscious mind. By spending a lifetime in this dialogue, you learn to negotiate with your fears rather than being paralyzed by them. You find that you can be safe, even in the middle of a storm, because you have practiced the conversation required to navigate it. 5. Spring cleaning the dark. Cupboards to fix a broken life. You must be willing to perform spring cleaning on the darkest parts of your mind. Goggins uses the metaphor of cupboards filled with spiders, cobwebs, and your biggest fears. Most people spend their lives trying to lock these cupboards and pretend they don't exist. They hide behind social media filters and lie about who they really are to gain approval. But Goggins argues that this deception is what keeps us empty. True growth begins when you open every door and spit shine the ugly truths. Whether it is obesity, a history of lying, or a lack of intelligence, acknowledging these flaws removes their power over you. Once you are brutally honest about your starting point, you can finally begin the work of changing it. This vulnerability is actually the source of his immense inner strength. When you have already relived your worst moments and decided to move forward anyway, the judgment of the outside world becomes insignificant. 6. Capping success to prevent perishability. The final takeaway is perhaps the most unconventional, the idea of capping success. Goggins deliberately limits his pursuit of traditional speaking monkey, fame, and financial maximization. He does this because he knows that extreme comfort is the enemy of the willpower he has spent 30 years building. By returning to ground zero every year, doing difficult, soot-covered work like smoke jumping, he ensures that his grit remains a living, breathing part of his identity. He views willpower as a perishable skill that requires constant upkeep. If he only traveled the world giving lectures, he would eventually be regurgitating old lessons rather than living new ones. This teaches us that success is a dangerous plateau. To stay found and avoid feeling lost or empty, you must continue to impose friction on your life even after you have achieved your goals. The moment you believe you have made it is the moment your anterior mid-cingulate cortex begins to regress. The most profound competitive advantage in a world of noise is a mind that has learned to be still in the face of suffering. You don't need a hack, a supplement, or a new protocol to find your purpose. You simply need the courage to look in the mirror, acknowledge the piece of shit voice, and do the work anyway. Greatness is not a destination. It is the process of extracting everything you can from the person you were supposed to be.